Welcome to this week's episode of Did You Know? Today we are focusing on the history of Nebraska's state capital of Lincoln. We are going to examine how Lincoln transformed from this to this. Settlers began moving into the Lincoln area during the mid-19th century.
Mostly the migration was internal American migration from actually Pennsylvania, from Illinois. And that Illinois migration, particularly after the 1870s, in the 1870s, 80s, and 90s, was very direct.
The village was originally called Lancaster, but later changed its name to Lincoln.
I think that was directly a post-Civil War. Let's pay tribute to Abraham Lincoln, and in 1867 they decided to choose that name. Lincoln's name is the name of the city.
The state capital of Nebraska, originally located in Omaha, was eventually moved to Lincoln.
I think it was just simply politics, and I think it was also the tendency of most states to want to separate the state capital from the largest city.
The city tried 3 different times to construct a state capitol building.
The first one is pretty much forgotten, but the second one is the one that had the classical, the classical details like so many state capitals. It was a fairly handsome building, but it was apparently poorly built and full of all sorts of problems, and the state needed a new capital for some years before they made the decision to build the extraordinary new capital that they built in the 1930s.
Several factors led to the growth of the city.
State capital, state institutions that went with the capital. The decision early on, just after the state capital was transferred here, to establish the state university, and that it would be here in Lincoln. That, of course, would open 2 years later in February of 1869. And then in 1870, the people who lived there obviously said that to develop as a city, we need to have railroads, and that began the mania.
The Lincoln train station is still standing to this day.
A rapid period of annexation occurred in the 1920s and again in the 1950s.
As the city grew larger, it began to annex nearby villages such as Havelock, Bethany, and University Place. In recent decades, the city has begun expanding to the south.
That area to the south of Old Cheney, a lot of that area was being pushed into a lot of development in the 1970s, but particularly in the boom of the 80s, it was developing rapidly. But South Point was another decade after that. It was a lot of push in the 1990s up toward 2000.
With the newly proposed sports arena and a beltway road around the city, Lincoln seems to just keep expanding. Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of Did You Know? If you want to know more about the city of Lincoln, go to the Nebraska History Museum or go on a tour of the historic Haymarket District. This has been Aaron Ball for Fast Forward.